hitting the button. We are going. Welcome, everybody. This is episode 154 of the Herpetoculture Podcast. I'm Justin Smith of Palmetto Coast Exotics.
I'm Jacob Ross with Longleaf Reptilia.
Real quick, this show is brought to you by BlackBoxCages.com. Please check them out. Rax Cages. If you saw us in Marietta over the weekend,
It
was a good time.
Was.
Sold a bunch of cages.
Yeah, it was
Brought
awesome.
home a bunch of cages.
Oh, yeah.
Did you get your setup?
No, I'm trying to decide if I'm going to quite yet because I'm going to be moving hopefully soon. So I don't know if I want to go through it all just to tear it back down. So I'm kind of debating on it. Plus, I need to get some stuff set up my cage first anyways and some thermostats and stuff. So I was off the ball on some of that. So
we came back Sunday and I spent most of Monday getting everything set up. I got the XR20 rack, and then I got 5 of the XA BioGs, which are the 18 by 80 by 24s. Got the rhinos set up in those, and I got some other stuff coming to fill out, like finish those cages and those setups. They'll look good, and I'll be having a video done on that as soon as those come in. I get them done. So.
Yeah, I got a XR20, which is a 20 slot. I think they call it a hatchling rack, but it's made, you can house, it has 3 different size tubs, so it's not just for hatchlings, certainly. But I got an XR20, I got a 3 slot V70, and then I got a 3x2x2. I believe they called it the Bio 24, if I remember correctly. I'd have to look, but it's their 3x2. Okay. Yeah, we're really off this week. But yeah, I got a 3x2x2 bio enclosure from them. Absolutely beautiful. It is a amazing enclosure. I can't wait to set it up. Like I said, I'm probably moving soon, so I'm trying to decide if I'm going to set everything up just to move it all, or if I want to leave it packaged for the time being. Rock and roll. But either way, I got to get some thermostats and some light bulbs and some timers and all that good jazz. But yeah, other than BlackBox, this episode is also brought to you by Steve's Snaketuary with Steve's Snaketuary and Venom Hot Sauce.
Yeah.
So check him out. Yeah, he does a lot of good stuff. He's kept running his own Snaketuary and
by the hot sauce, you're helping him with public outreach, public education, relocations, rescues, like rehabilitations.
He does shows,
all that stuff.
You help fund his Snaketuary. He does all kinds of stuff. So check him out. Follow him on all social media platforms.
Yes.
And,
we got a lot to unpack this episode because we are joined by Mr. Zach Goodnow of Equatorial Ecosystems. What's going on, dude?
Not too much. Another day. How about you guys? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, no problem. For sure. Excited to have you on and get into this.
Yeah, it's everything's good. You know, we're in the swing of breeding season. At least I am. Just sort of gearing up and trying to get all my ducks in a row for eggs and stuff, and make sure I'm ready for when I start getting clutches. So
yeah, man.
But yeah, so like I said, we got a lot to sort of cover. I sent you the outline, and I said even then we may not get to all of it because you have a lot going on over there, man. So what's the sort of just a quick rundown of what you got right now and sort of what came first? I mean, you can give us your backstory as to how you got into herps if you want to. We kind of leave that open to people if they want to throw that in there, if you feel like it.
Yeah, so I guess getting started, my story's pretty similar, somewhat similar to everywhere else. I was a dinosaur kid, but I guess a little different. My dad was is a landscape architect, and he did both the kind of landscape design and also the construction. So he was out on job sites pretty much every day. And I grew up in a suburb of New Orleans, so we were not rural, but it wasn't big city by any means. And it was still, woods, and we had relatively big lot sizes. So he had, there was wildlife everywhere, and he'd bring home, speckled king snakes, and we'd keep them for a little while and, let them go in the yard, or kept a scarlet king snake for a little while, had box turtles. I was exposed to native plants and animals from a young age. And so I kind of was born into all this. My mom is in the medical field, so I kind of had science from both sides. And so I kept mostly native herps from, as a child into kind of middle school. And I also grew tropical plants, a lot of orchids from, 7, 8 years old off into high school and into college. And when I first kind of got serious into what you'd call exotic herps was I had moved to college and I was staying in a dorm, and I was researching how to build a terrarium to take some of my plants to school, and came across, you're looking for tropical plant terrariums, and one of the first websites that pops up is Dendroboard, which is the old school dart frog forum. And I had read about dart frogs in books as a kid and was always fascinated by them, but didn't realize at that time that they weren't toxic in captivity, and that they were, you could keep them and you probably go to a reptile show and find some. And so I started researching, fell down that rabbit hole, kind of researched for my whole fall semester. And then in January of 2011, that's when I got my first darts. So everything kind of started with dart frogs from a non-native herp standpoint. And from about 2011 to 2014, 15, I kept pretty much predominantly dart frogs. I had some day geckos and kind of similar stuff sprinkled in there, but I was going back and forth in dorms in college apartments with roommates who were friends but weren't necessarily herp people, so couldn't deal with necessarily mice in the freezer and crickets. And I kept basically what I could culture, so cultured fruit flies. So I had dart frogs and the geckos and stuff that could kind of go along with that. And then being in South Louisiana, there weren't a lot of dart frog people here, so I just happened to post on Dendroboard one day. They had like a local forum, and just to see if anybody else was here. And I was contacted by a guy by the name of Ian Heiler, who, come to find out, he was one of the old timers at the Audubon Aquarium. And he invited me over to his house, and he introduced me to a couple of other people who were in the dart frogs and kind of in the zoo world. And we all became real good friends. Ian served as a pretty solid dart frog mentor to me. Some of the other guys were kind of imparted other herp influences on me. And as I got to know Ian, come to find out, he was really one of the godfathers of dart frogs. If you're familiar with El Cope auratus, he was the one who went down to El Cope, Panama with permits through the aquarium, collected the first animals, brought them back to the US, and was distributing them around institutions. And then they also, back then, AZA wasn't as stringent, and things could go to the public more easily. And so he was the one who actually introduced things like El Cope and Kahlua and cream auratus and such into the hobby. And so, we didn't have a huge community down here, but the people who influenced me were, longtime herp veterans in both dart frogs and other frogs, or in other species in general. And it really exposed me to things that maybe they weren't in vogue in the mainstream hobby. I saw a friend of mine was breeding Lystrophus, the tricolor hognose, 5 years before all these somewhat recent European imports were coming in, back when those were, $1,500 a pop. And I just, at the time, I just thought it was a cool snake, but to the rest of the world, that was something that, a lot of mainstream herpers didn't see. So I was able to be exposed to some interesting stuff at a young age in my herping career. So I think that kind of molded my interest going forward. So from about 2015 on, I started getting into some lizards. I've kept a number of anole species, kept and bred several different anoles. I keep Camelliolus barbatus now, which is the Cuban bearded anole. Kept a bunch of day geckos. Right now I've got Delsuma clemeri, ornata, and then Lygodactylus williamsi. Stayed in darts. I've kept almost every genus of darts. I've never kept Adelpha babies. but I think I've kept most of the others that are available to the hobby at a genus level, not far from keeping every species. And then fairly recently started venturing into snakes. We bought our own house in 2019, and so I've got a dedicated chest freezer that I can exclude from the normal person food, and kind of started building up a generalized collection. I have trouble. I have broad interests, so I have trouble focusing in on one thing. So I've tried to focus in on certain types of animals that I like, as opposed to, there's no way I could have, a garage full of ball pythons or a garage full of any select species. So, yeah, that's kind of my story up to now.
Awesome.
Awesome, man.
I dig the Highlands and Islands shirt too.
Oh yeah, this is one of my favorites. I love the.
Yeah. I mean, how do you freaking juggle it all? I mean, I like I kept darts as well. I didn't get too heavy into them, but cultures, when they're good, they're good. When they're not, they're a real pain. And maybe it's for Jake and I, like, snakes spoil you. That's what we've always sort of been exposed to the most. And so when you get stuff that needs more time, which is pretty much everything in comparison to snakes, it's
Right.
How do you, what's it like going from that stuff that needs sort of, every other day attention or daily attention to things like bloods that are just kind of, like they do fine if you kind of just ignore them?
Yeah. So I guess coming from frogs and kind of learning it all and getting habits from that, you're kind of geared towards that every day, every other day kind of attention. And I try to do that. I try to see every animal every day. And it can be a challenge at times, and it's time consuming, but I've automated as much as I can. All of the watering is on misting. I've set up manifolds to, I've got a DI filter, and I've got a bunch of different valves. If I need to fill this reservoir, I turn this valve and turn on the water, and I just let it run for a few hours, and vice versa all the way around. I've got it pretty much down to where I'm either, for the snakes, I'm cleaning enclosures, a couple of days a week, depending on the species. I'm feeding snakes, 2 days a week or so, not an individual snake twice a week, but, colubrids one day, pythons another day. The darts, I'm down to, I'm feeding, 3 days a week, the darts and the lizards. And so I've kind of got it in a routine to where every day I do a little bit, and I'm looking at everything every day, but I'm not necessarily working everything every day.
Yeah.
The other benefit that I've had is I was sent home to work from home it's been like 2 years and a week now because of COVID, and I'm still working from home. So I eat lunch at work, and then I take my lunch break and I go and I water plants and I feed and maintenance during the day. So it reduces what I have to do in the afternoons, and it also saves from having to commute. I'm cutting an hour off of my day just in a commute.
Right.
Yeah. I've thought about doing something where, at least when I was dealing with cresteds on a much heavier level, it was like I was going to have an A group and a B group. And so that way I'm not doing everybody all at once. A group would be on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and then B group would be Wednesdays, Thursdays.
You mean Tuesdays?
Saturdays, yeah. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Just to make things a little easier, but I think by the time I had started to get out of those, it didn't really matter anymore. But in terms of, are you breeding anything this year, snake wise?
Yeah, so I've paired. I had 5 blood females that were kind of big enough to go. So I tried with the 5 of them. 2 of them didn't really progress. I have a friend who's a vet, and so we ultrasounded them in January, and there was 2 who really weren't developing anything. So I kind of put those on hold, and I'll try those next year. And so I've got 3 that are still going. I fed earlier today, and 1 refused food. The other 2 are still eating. So I'm starting to see other people around the country are starting to get ovulations and eggs. So I think I'm getting close, but this will be my first year breeding them, so I still don't fully know what I'm doing either.
I got you.
That's cool.
I'll tell you what, you have one of the nicest northern Mexican pine snakes I've ever seen, man.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, man, that thing is absolutely wicked. Do you have a pair of those or just a single animal?
Yeah, so those are a friend of mine that I have a degree in wildlife and wetland ecology, and so a buddy of mine who I went to school with, those are actually his. I'm taking care of him. He took a seasonal job up in Alaska, and he was like, "Look, I'm either gonna have to get rid of my snakes, or I know you keep some snakes. Do you care if you take care of them? I've had these animals." He had the dad of that animal for like 16 years. And
Oh,
so
wow.
he lost the female to complications with, she looked like she was egg bound. He took her to the vet. The vet kind of had the idea that she was egg bound too. They opened her up. It was just some weird oviduct issue, and it probably didn't need to be opened up. It was one of those things that you couldn't tell from the outside, and she ended up passing. But he produced the one that kind of peach headed one that you're referring to. So I have the dad and the son, and then I just picked up a female last year. It's a 2021 kid. So it'll be a little ways before we're breeding those again, but I don't know if he may take the group and we'll just split eggs, or I'll hold on to a male and get him a girl. However that works out when we get to that point.
I got you. Nice, man. Yeah, that thing is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, that young one is the dad is kind of your typical yellow body with the brownish, kind of reddish brown blotches.
Right.
But yeah, that's a really nice young adult.
Yeah.
So is it safe to say that you have sort of a particular focus on bloods?
Now, I guess you could say that that's probably the single highest number of individuals of a species I keep. I kind of got into them, not on accident, but semi on accident. A friend of mine was talking to me about the North Sumatran Curtis, which is they call him the pumpkin head or the orange head locale. And I thought those were cool. I didn't have any snakes at the time. Thought those were cool. I've always liked bloods, especially the red bloods, Brongers Mai, because of the just the normal form is you can get really nice colors even if you don't want to play with morphs. But the size of the commonly seen animals kind of was intimidating. I don't have any interest in ever keeping retics or berms or something like. I'm just not a huge snake kind of person. So I was always kind of intimidated by a 20-pound, 6 to 8 foot snake that you see so many of these big ones get to. But the Curtis stays significantly smaller. They've got natural variation, and they're just really nice in the natural form. So I picked up a pair of those in late 2019 from Trace Harden, and then picked up another female from Fascination Herp out of Houston, was at a local show, and they had produced some offspring from a pair of farmed animals. So that's unrelated to anything else in the country. And so I picked up that girl and was keeping just the 1.2. And then a friend of mine took a job out of country, and he had built up a decent collection of young bloods. He had some golden eye stuff, some batik stuff, and didn't really want to offload the collection. He's like, "Hey, you're keeping these Curtis already. Would you be interested in just, keeping these bloods too? You'll be able to breed them long before I'm back. So, play with them. We'll, make some of the things that I was going to make, kind of further the project. And then when I get back, we'll figure out, I'll either give him offspring or his adults back, or however we work it out." And so I ended up with this group of the Brongers Mai too. And so from that, I got a really nice red martyr line male, T positive batik, 007 female, and then what they call an ivory batik, or I think the morph name for it is white lightning. It's the non-albino form of what they call electrostatic. So that's kind of what I started with. And then from there, I've just kind of plugged in some of my own stuff that I bought in that time frame.
Yeah, Jake kept a couple of years ago. I don't even know if they were bloods or something else, but I've had one or two over the years as well, and they're.
Mhm.
I know it seems like the guys that are really into bloods, like they're all in. You know, they're really about them. They don't. It doesn't seem like it's very often you see someone that just has like one or two. It's like if they have bloods, they have a lot of bloods.
I'm gonna be that guy, except not with bloods. I'm gonna get a pair of Borneos, but that's gonna be me because like I want to like bloods more than I do, if I'm being honest. Because like I don't know why. It's one of those like I really wanted to like them, but I kept them and like there's nothing wrong with them, but they just like they weren't for me, and like that was fine. I think they're awesome animals. I absolutely love them, and I do plan on getting a pair of Borneos. But yeah, I don't know. It was a weird phase for me. I don't know what it was. I was very fascinated by. I was very I don't know what it was. I was very fascinated by them, and I wanted to get like some morph. Like I wanted like bloods for like morph stuff, and like I got some, and then I kind of fell more for the wild type stuff and started going more of that route. And I don't know. I just kind of dropped off with bloods. I think they annoyed me too much. I got a couple animals that were just frustrating. I think it just turned me off to them, to be honest. I think I went about it wrong. I got the wrong animals and just kind of turned me off to them altogether. But
yeah, I think of mine, I have one that is absolutely unhandleable. I mean, when you're going in there to clean, or when you're even taking it out, and unfortunately it's a girl, so it's a little bit bigger. But I put on gloves, long sleeves to kind of reduce the heat signature, trying to fiddle with a hook. It's not easy to handle those things with a hook just because their sheer girth and their weight.
yeah.
So it's kind of get them to where they're not facing you, tail it, support the body without getting tagged, get it into another enclosure with a lid, just so that you can work the tub or whatever you got them in, and figure out a way to get her back in, without getting bit. But I probably have 20-ish animals, and that's the only one that I really can't just open the tub and take out.
Yeah, all mine, I think I had at the most at one time, I think I had 4. And like all of them were relatively handleable. I had a couple that were kind of pissy, I like to say. Certainly didn't like me, but they were handleable. Yeah, they were handleable. I wouldn't put my face up to them, give them a kiss or nothing, but you could pick them up relatively easily. Once you had them in your hand, they kind of, chilled out, but I don't know. It wasn't about their attitudes or anything. And that's the thing. I couldn't tell you why they weren't for me. They just weren't. That's the thing. I have nothing negative to say about bloods. Absolutely not. But I don't know. It was weird. But yeah, no.
There's just some species I don't love. I think Australian animals are cool from a adaptation and science standpoint, but you listen to so many people, their first place they want to go is I got to get to Australia. For me, that's Central America. Australia is probably the bottom of my list. I love, from Mexico to northern South America. That's kind of my fascination.
Yeah, dude, I would love to go to South America. Any of those areas. Australia, I would love to go to Australia. Don't get me wrong. I'm definitely one of those people, but
I don't know, I'm with
Central
you, man.
and South
Costa
America.
Rica's
Yeah, Costa
right
Rica would be amazing, dude. Oh my God.
Have you gone down there at all? Have you done any?
No, my wife and I just booked this summer though to Costa Rica. We were supposed to get married in June of 2020, and COVID screwed up the entire wedding. So we booted that a full year back. So we got married last June, and then our honeymoon was supposed to be to Costa Rica, but we were still kind of in the middle of the COVID mess. And so I said, let's do a honeymoon in the country, save some money, and then book a big trip once we kind of know what life's going to be like. So fingers crossed that everything stays tame as it is now, and we can get down there.
That would be awesome, man. Is your wife into the frogs and snakes at all?
She got into it because of me. Before me, no, but she doesn't mind the snakes. She could probably do without them. Really likes the frogs, really likes the different turtles and tortoises I keep. I have one monkey tail skink, Carusia, and she absolutely hates that thing. If there was anything in the collection she'd get rid of, it's the Carusia.
That's funny.
Why is it prickly?
I don't know. She's just never from the day it came in. She's never liked them. My Ian, my Dark Frog mentor's wife, that was her thing. She had Carusia and she's bred Carusia for years and has I don't even know how many anymore, but tons. And so we'd go over there, and my wife would come, in recent years, and her Carusia, she's got them tame. I mean, they'll ride around on her shoulder while she's doing housework, and Catherine would still have nothing to do with them. She just, for whatever reason, doesn't enjoy the species. So
I mean, they do have creepy eyes.
They're
Like,
so freaking cool, though, man. Monkey tail skinks are amazing.
Yeah.
Everyone, most of the people that I've talked to that have had them, they're like, they're kind of violent.
Yeah, I've heard they're not nice creatures.
Yeah, they're for an herbivore, they can bite, and even just handle them, their claws.
Yeah, I've seen people scratched up from those things.
Yeah.
Gee whiz.
So I noticed cruising through your Instagram that you have Bairds.
I do, and that's your fault.
Of course it is.
Yeah, I kind of going back to my Central American enjoyment, that's kind of, they fit into that mindset of, a desert Southwest down in the Mexico species. Mm-hmm. And the first ones I picked up was a pair of the Mexican form. I got them from Daytona last year. So I think those are San Antonio Zoo line. Okay. And then after Daytona, I picked up a pair of the hypos, of the T positive, or whatever they are. And I'd like to eventually get a nice pair of a Texas locale, one that's kind of got the nice reddish brick undertones with a steely.
Mm-hmm. See that, Jake? A man with taste.
Hey, I have nothing against Bairds, man. I like Bairds. I think they're a spray painted yellow rat snake, but it's fine. No, they're super cool, man. The Mexicans and the Lomas are incredible animals, man. They are very, very pretty.
Yeah, and I don't like you've pushed for years. I don't understand why they're so underrated. Listening to you guys is where I first heard about them, and that was kind of when I went to Daytona last year. I told the group of buddies that I went with, I was like, if there's Bairds here, that's one of the things I'd like to pick up, and they showed up, and so I didn't have any choice but to get them. But I had never heard of them 5 years ago.
Were those the ones that Jordan Parrott was selling?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I got my biggest adult male albino is from Jordan from 2 years ago.
Oh, nice.
I think so. He was about a yearling when I got it. So, man, you even got your Platus.
Yeah, and I've kept, those are hard down here. The Abanawi are probably the easiest because they're from a lower elevation. I'd love to. I've got a buddy in Buffalo who breeds some of the nicest Fantasticus in the country, and I'd love to try them, but our summers and with hurricanes were just so. I'd be scared if we lost power. They wouldn't live more than a couple hours.
Right there. Right, go back up.
Wait,
did you breed in Golems?
That is the first and only snake species I've bred to date.
Oh my gosh, what a species to be successful with, man.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
So yeah, I ended up with a trio from a friend, and they were, one of the females was one person's, one of the females was another's, and then the male was his, and then I kept them. So it's like this 4-way breeding loan. And I produced them last year, and then we ended up kind of saying, this 4-way deal is a lot. So I gave the adults back, and I kept, I produced 8 female offspring, which is almost unheard of to get. Everybody I've talked to said you basically get, almost equal sexes. If it's, skewed 1 or 2 one way is pretty normal, but I got 8 females hatched out. And so we kind of divvied those up among all of us, and I kept 2, and I've swapped one of them with a buddy of mine local who breeds them. And so I'll have a 2022 male and the 21 female that'll be totally mine.
Nice, man.
That's cool. Casey got some at Daytona. He got, I think, a female.
Yeah.
There was one table across from us. and they were selling some. They just had, I think, a lone female, and Casey bought it, and I was playing with it when we were
Dude,
there.
they're so freaking cool, man.
It's one of those species you really have to see them firsthand to sort of have a better appreciation for them.
Yeah.
You see pictures and stuff, and it's cool and all, but it's like once you get your hands on one, it's just
It's different.
it's like
Yeah.
ball python, but it's not. You know,
The scalation is almost like a Gila or a bead.
Yeah,
I guess it's a similar adaptation.
beaded, like the beaded scales, man. It's
Yeah.
wild. They're really, really incredible animals. Those are one pythons. I don't have many species on my python list anymore, but those are on there. I would really like to get in Golems one day. They're super neat animals.
Yeah, I like them a lot. And the babies come out. The adults can be kind of variable in color. The babies all come out pretty much jet black with highlighter yellow stripes. So
Right.
I kind of wish they'd keep that yellow coloration into adulthood, but I really like the kind of reddish brown ones.
Yeah. And honestly, like any type of color change that animals go through as adults, from babies to adults, is always fun to watch to me.
Right.
Even if it's minute, but just like watching my carpets go from red to this in between, like pinkish white, to starting to get some of their adult colors, to getting their adult colors. It's cool to watch. Even though as adults they're not the bright red babies that they were, but they're still it's just cool to watch that transition with anything.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have to be a green tree python.
Yes, it does.
No.
He's got emeralds too. You have one northern basin.
So I had a basin, and that was just that animal had a heart defect. That was a friend had purchased one, and at about a year, he noticed it wasn't growing all that well. And our other friend, who's a vet, kind of took a look at it and said, seemed like it was something with the heart. So he was able to work out a deal with who he got it from and got credit or whatever. And he's now working with a bigger group of them. I have a northern that the same friend who gave me the bloods when he moved out of the country, he sent me a female northern that we bought at Tinley in 2018. And then I was able to find, as far as we can tell, it was either a captive born from a gravid female or maybe a real young import, but the animal had been in country for a couple of years, takes food fine, an anaconda phase male that I got a few months ago. And it's eaten for me and has done well so far. So fingers crossed, let him acclimate for a year or so. And the girl's big enough, she could go. So maybe next year I'll try messing with them.
Very nice, man. We were talking about emeralds this weekend with Casey Cannon, and we both talked about the anaconda phase, and we agreed the anaconda phase is my personal favorite. I absolutely love those. I know a lot of people like the really high white stuff, but for me, those anaconda phases really do it, man. They're incredible.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you look at like the white northerns versus basins. If you want a really cool white and green snake, and you have the means to do it, basins are the way to go. Just their attitude is so much better, and they get a little bigger, and the white's a lot nicer. So I think my friend likes the white northerns better. So I'm hoping that, and when we pair these, we get a nice mix, and I'll just hold back a couple litters, and I'll keep the greens, and he can have the whites, and we'll both have projects to play with.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely the ideal situation. It's always fun having projects with friends, even though me and Justin's, every time we seem to have done that, it crashes and fails horribly. I don't know what it is or why. We haven't done that in quite some time.
Us,
how did I curse
the Wisconsin curse?
How did I curse us? You're the one who's taking care of those
like
Amazons,
living
bro.
on a Indian burial ground or something.
You were the one taking care of those Amazons. That's all I'm gonna say about that.
No comment. So, as someone who has both vivariums and racks, and that being sort of a never-ending debate, sort of what's your thoughts on the whole thing? Because I think we've been pretty open about our ideas on it, and me especially saying, do what works for the species, like what works best. So, but in your experience between the?
Yeah, I mean I kind of feel the same way. You take like a blood python and you try to build an enclosure. I guess going kind of backing up, I started with, dart frogs. So that's big, elaborate enclosures, that there's kind of no end to how you can design them. And so that was my mindset transitioning from dart frogs to, say tree frogs that live high in the canopy and need more sterile conditions, or lizards that don't necessarily want, full out, what people call bioactive, full scale planted enclosures, all the way down to snakes that may not feel comfortable in a glass enclosure. And so to me, it's kind of do what's best for the particular needs of your animal, and also what fits, your cleaning methods and how you handle things. If you're real meticulous and you can keep something spotless, you can probably keep animals that might prefer something more, bioactive on a more sterile substrate. If you're a little on the, you don't want to clean, every dart frog feces or whatever out of, off of paper towels, not suggesting to keep on paper towels, but, to use an example, you might want to go the more, bioactive, naturalistic route. I think you can keep things, there are parameters that you have to meet for a species, but there's not a set recipe that you have to follow, just like the next person has to follow. How I keep something may be different than how, you keep something. And that doesn't mean either of us are wrong. You come in, you hear round and round the dart frog people, don't use sphagnum moss, only use, you have to have 8 inches of leaf litter in your bottom, and on and on, all these dogmatic rules that it's not just in the dart frog hobby, it's in every hobby. It's just different dogma for a different species.
Right.
But, Ian produced hundreds of the terrestrial, Dendrobates and Adelphobates for himself, for institutions, and for, the public sector. And his breeder enclosures were, 12-inch tall acrylic, what he called flats, with a layer of pea gravel, a layer of live moss, a cocoa hut with a petri dish underneath it, and a little pool of water in the corner. And we used to laugh with him that, none of your enclosures have leaf litter, but you're extremely successful. And it's just simply that he was old school. He did it since the 80s, before people used leaf litter. And he was just as successful as anybody is today. So if somebody who only learned how to keep a species by reading on the internet walked into his, terrarium area, they'd blast him. But,
Yeah.
He figured out how to do it. So there's no real set, this is how you have to keep something, and this is the only way. You have to adapt your habits and your climate and everything else to it. And if that means, you have to keep some species in a rack, some species in an enclosure, then, do what's best for the animal in your situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's not a lot of people that sort of not necessarily see, but do both sides of that. I know, like with dart frogs, you kind of don't have many other options. It's kind of a, if it's temporary, sure, paper towel, whatever, but like long term, you have to kind of do the dance and get a nice vivarium sort of setup going. But
you even see a shift in dart frogs. For when I started, it was, drainage layer, ABG mix, leaf litter. And then I kind of started using calcine clay. It's fired clay, like the hydro balls, but it's finer rocks. And I use that. I drill all of my enclosures, and then I use that as the drainage layer and also the substrate. Because if you think of a rainforest soils are extremely nutrient poor. Typically, it's a clay. And then the trees are typically evergreen, so think like live oak, but they shed their leaves when a new flush of leaves comes. So there's a constant supply of leaf litter on the forest floor, but it's quickly eaten up by, either microorganisms or invertebrates, converted it in nitrogen. The plants eat that up because the soils are so nutrient poor, and then the process just happens again. It's leaf litter fall, quick decomposition, use of the nutrients, it goes back into biomass, and then it repeats. So you've got a really, really small layer of organic matter over something inorganic. And so the whole idea of, ABG, 2 inches of ABG or something, that works great for 3 years, but then that's also going to break down. When
Right.
you're using something like fired clay, it never breaks down. I have tanks that are 7, 8 years old that I've never changed the clay portion out. I just keep topping it with leaf litter because most of the leaf organic matter breaks down and gets recycled by plants or whatever else in there, and you just constantly add more of that. But as long as your clay layer is aerobic, so you're not allowing water to build up to the top, it drains by mechanical pumping or a actual drain hole. That layer is fine into perpetuity. So people are shifting towards inorganic soils, and then now you see a lot of people use that filter foam with leaf litter on top, and the filter foam is rigid enough that you get that serves as kind of your drainage layer and also your basis for roots to anchor into. The roots grow into the drainage layer, and they have access to water and whatever nutrients are in that water, and then they get their organic matter from the leaf litter just like you would the clay. So even in something like dart frogs, I don't think you'll ever get away from some level of naturalistic, but they are going towards a more inorganic, clean method.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know. I never. I mean, as far as substrate goes, it was always. I don't think the frogs much cared about the ABG mix, but the plants, I'm sure, definitely appreciated it. But
right.
I mean, you're a big plant guy. That's a big part of your Instagram and stuff too. Was that something you got into before you got into Vivaria, or was that something that kind of came with it?
Yeah, so I kind of got started. I've been growing tropical plants since I was a kid, and so that kind of started everything. And then when I started keeping dart frogs, the types of plants that I kept kind of shifted towards terrarium stuff, and now I've got terrariums, and I've converted I keep all of this. The house has an attached garage, but it was built in the 80s. And so our driveway wasn't designed for the size of vehicles that we drive today. And so we can't make the turn into the garage to park the vehicles. So I just insulated the garage door, put a mini split in, and that's now my herp and plant room. And so I've got 2 kind of mini greenhouse grow tents in there to grow plants that can't handle our extreme heat in the summer. And then I also have a greenhouse for tropical plants in the yard. So I do a lot of plant stuff, both for my enclosures and to kind of sell to pay for the hobby, and also just as a second or 15th hobby, depending on how you count.
Nice.
So on Instagram you talk about more rare plants.
Hold on, I kind of lost you. It went pixely.
Your Instagram says that you're a producer of rare plants.
Yes.
So what's I guess with cuttings and stuff being so popular, what constitutes certain plants being rare other than others?
So sort of like animals, there's some plants that come from countries that don't export, or there aren't nurseries in those countries that produce the plants. And, maybe, a collector in South Florida brought some back. Panama is a country that there aren't really any plant nurseries in that are sending plants to the US. But, 30 years ago, there were people that flew down to Panama and pre-CITES and pre all of these countries kind of closing up exports. You go down there, go into the jungles and collect seed, collect specimens, bring them back into the country. And then they're not hard necessarily to propagate, but your beginning stock is only so many. And, some plants, it's not as simple as, chopping it at every node and taking a cutting. You have to reproduce it by seed. And so, you have to have 2 plants blooming at the same time. And then it takes 2 years for a seed to develop on the plant, and then to grow that from a seedling to a commercially available plant is another couple of years. So some of it is just things that don't propagate that well or aren't widely available, or 5 years ago were niche terrarium species. When COVID hit, plants kind of blew up, especially in a lot of, I've noticed in a lot of kind of tech-centric cities. I think people were able to work from home. They made, a lot of money. They weren't affected a lot by the pandemic, but when you were in lockdown and you couldn't leave your house, or you could only leave your house for essentials, people wanted to surround themselves with nature. And one of the ways was to just buy a bunch of houseplants, and plants that were common to dart frog people and have been common to dart frog people for 10 years went from being, $15 kind of throwaway cuttings to $150 plants overnight.
Oh,
And a lot of what you see on the market as rare plants are not necessarily rare. They were just niche plants that aren't in tissue culture or aren't mass produced in any kind of trade, but have always been passed around by hobbyists. And now there's just such a demand for them. As soon as they hit the market, they're gone. So some of that is what I grow. I also grow a number of kind of small Mexican cacti. I do some Madagascan succulents and some stuff that actually is rare because you can't get it out of Mexico anymore, or it's just extremely slow growing and you can only reproduce it by seed.
Damn. What are your favorite plants for using with vivariums and dart frogs?
For dart frogs,
well, I guess for both tree frogs as well, because we haven't touched on that yet, but you have those as well.
So similar kind of to the whole rack versus enclosure thing, depending on the species of frog or any kind of species that you're putting in a terrarium, that'll kind of govern the plants you need. I kind of view I've gotten to where with my dart frog enclosures, I like kind of mass plantings of 3 to 5 different plant species. I tend to try to do plants that are only from Central or South America. I'm just kind of a purist in that. I'm not to the point where, if my dart frog's from Panama, I'm only using Panamanian plants, because that can be tough sourcing those things. But if I'm dealing with New World species, I try to use New World plants. So I kind of try to set up my substrate and my hardscape, and then something kind of big and leafy that will vine and grow into the background. Something like Philodendron varicosum, you get real nice big leaves. The back of the leaf has a bright red color, and it provides cover for whatever species it is, because no matter what frog you're keeping, it's going to get into the leaf litter at some point, even Rhinamea or Oophaga, and it wants to feel secure. So, and the more secure it feels, the more bold they're going to be. And so I'll do something big and leafy to kind of eat up space and give them shadow on the ground, and also places to kind of tuck away into. And those are also good for the arboreal species to deposit eggs. And then I'll put in something probably kind of tall and leafy in the corner, a calathea or a spathiphyllum, a peace lily, again, to give them cover and a place to roost. And then I'll just push in some accent plants that are more for me, give some leaf texture or some color to the tank. And then depending on the species, I think, and this is probably dart frog people like to use bromeliads. I do not like to use bromeliads, except in tanks where the frogs, the husbandry of the frogs calls for them. If you keep a tank of tinks and pack it with bromeliads, that really doesn't serve them any purpose, because they don't deposit tadpoles to them. It's just there to eat up space. I'd much rather do that with big leafy plants that they can use to sit on and lay eggs on and other things. If I'm doing, an Oophaga, I'll use bromeliads, but I try to still get away from neorhizilias, just because it's just a thing for me. Almost all of the Oophaga are from Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, into South America. Almost all neorhizilias are Brazilian. So there are plenty of nice, really cool, Central American bromeliad species that you can use in these tanks that handle the waste and the excess egg, the broken down eggs that a Rhinamea or a Oophaga tadpole produce without rotting out the bromeliad, and also gives you a nice effect. And it happens to also be, from the same country of origin.
Yeah. I mean, when I had my Vanzolini, I had one in with them, or one, or I might have even had 2 in there, and they were in that thing all the time. They loved it. But
yeah, and they'll raise tads and everything in them.
wasn't that well versed in plants. That's what's interesting too, is you'd mentioned the philodendron, the varicosum. I had one of those, and I had it in a tank that I had some imported blue jeans, and it did great in that tank. And then, of course, the blue jeans was a complete disaster. And I took that plant out, and I tried to grow it outside of that tank, and it, for whatever reason, it struggled and never came back.
Yeah, those just want, the leaves are so big, and I think they're thin. Those are the only time I've seen people do well with them outside of tanks, but it's typically like in a bathroom where it gets pretty high humidity most of the time. If you're just trying to grow it on a windowsill or something, unless your plant's really nice rooted and you keep it pretty wet, those tend to struggle outside of, they just like it really humid.
Jake, what plants are you using? You should put some with the Nerodia,
none
dude.
yet. No, I plan to. I have plans to get into some plants, but I have to do a lot of things. I'm gonna keep it relatively simple. I like the pothos idea, to let that vine around and grow, and because I want to keep it to potted stuff in my enclosures, because for a lot of the snake species that I want to do planted stuff with, they don't necessarily need a saturated environment. So I worry about actually watering plants in the enclosure and then keeping them, hydrated without overwatering my snakes. So I feel like potted plants would be the way to go, and just kind of viney ones that'll grow around the enclosure, and let it go up. And that way, when I need to water, I can contain it to the pot, help a little bit with the humidity in the enclosure, and rock and roll with that. But yeah, no, I have a lot of snake species that I plan on doing it with. We'll see how potted plants go with snakes. I'm a little worried about them destroying them and just tipping over the pots, because I want to do a planted pothos in this cage I'm going to do from BlackBox. But it's going to be in with a big yellow rat, and
they're tad destructive.
He's big and he's strong. He's very large. He's a very large animal. So I worry about him tipping over the pot or something, but I want to get something kind of shallow, wide, hopefully not tip it over. But I also worry about him taking the plant out of the pot. So we'll see.
Yeah, something I've done, like with emeralds, is I'll take a potted plant and take something like a 16 or 32 ounce deli cup, and as long as the pot's wide enough to where it sits on the top, you can either, if you have substrate, bury that partially, so that'll keep them from tipping it, and you can also keep some water in that deli, so it'll be a little heavier to keep them from tipping. And if you just have, if you're growing pothos or some of those, the grocery store philodendron types, if you put a little, just an inch or so of the soil line submerged in that water, it'll just wick up, and then you don't have to worry about keeping your terrarium substrate overly wet, but your pot stays moist, and you also don't have to water near as much.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
In some of my chondro cages, I have just pothos in the water bowl, just growing from that. But I've noticed you kind of have to have a pretty big chunk of pothos in there for it to really work well, because I've tried it with small cuttings with only 1 or 2 leaves on them, and they never seem to take off. Like, they never seem to do well. They seem to just consistently just stay where they're at when you put them in there.
Yeah, it's like they don't die, but they don't
grow either.
Yeah.
But putting I was telling Jake, what I've been doing is I go to Walmart and get decent sized pothos for $10, and then I'll cut that up either in half or in quarters, and then put those pieces with the new BioGs that I got with the rhino rat snakes and one of the chondros. I did that and got some pots that have a little reservoir in the bottom, and I just split those up and put those in those cages, and those have LEDs, so they're they should grow really well in those. But even in that rack that I have the chondros in, it's a Cambro rack, and it has lights on each shelf. I don't know, those, for pothos, I was kind of surprised at how neutral they were. Like I said, they weren't dying, but they weren't growing, and I don't know if it was just not frequent enough water changes or what. I mean, I'm not really a plant guy. You kind of become a plant guy sort of by default when you get into dart frogs, because it's part of the whole thing. But as far as hardcore learning about plants and that kind of thing, and what does best where and whatnot. I don't know. I've always been told pothos will grow in like a dark closet. You know, that's supposed to be one of the easiest plants to get to grow, and these just didn't.
Yeah, it could be just like you said, the cuttings were kind of small, and they, the bigger cutting you start with, the more area it has to photosynthesize and to kind of get started, and probably bigger cuttings even without roots will probably get going faster.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I love them because, like you said, for humidity reasons, even in the individual tubs of that Canberra rack with the chondros, I can tell, you can just feel that there's more humidity in there.
Mhm.
Right.
And I think with those, because they don't have a ton of ventilation either, I think it's really good to help circulate air a little bit. And it's just such a simple and inexpensive and easy sort of hack for species, especially, like emerald and stuff that need a little bit more of that boost for, sheds and stuff. So
yeah, and just cover. I had a friend,
Yeah.
my friend who has the basins, he just took, he didn't even use live plants. It was just some of the kind of the more plastic, they're not the silk plants. They're the plasticky fake plants from Michael's or a craft store. And he hung them up on his perches, and the basin moved to the opposite side of the cage and sat perched in between the clumps of greenery. Just, they see that as, pattern breakup and everything else too. So it's got to be beneficial to them, just from a, people like to talk about enrichment and such.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That would be nice. Eventually I'd like these pothos in my chondro tubs to get big enough to where I can have it in it, like do a separate water bowl and then have that's just full of water and it just growing from there.
Right.
Our buddy David Brahms, he has a giant, I think it's either a pothos or philodendron or maybe both together, in his room. He planted one and it just took over, and he's just let it go, and he's got its own light and everything, and he's like, that bumped up the ambient humidity in his room, a ridiculous amount.
Yeah, I bet.
It's a big just blob of plant just in his room. It's just growing uncontrollably. I'll have to find a picture of it.
And it works even better because then you can just take cuttings from that for your enclosures and
you don't
stuff.
Have to buy another plant ever again.
Right.
No, that's great. Yeah, no, I saw your little rainforest setup on your Instagram the other day in your garage with all your plants. I thought that was really neat.
Yeah, so that's one of the grow tents. It's just kind of it's almost like the extruded aluminum pieces that you would put a tent together with. And then it's got this canvas covering the inside's all like silver mylar, so it reflects light. And I just put up some cheap Amazon LEDs, and then there's 2 baker's racks in there, and it's just loaded down with mounted plants and potted plants. And it's got a Mist King hooked up to it, and I've got, I don't know, probably 20 misters that go off in there.
Awesome, man. Yeah, no, I thought that was really neat.
Let's see. David does have a picture of this. All the awesome contrasts. Oh yeah. Hey, that's the one I produced.
Nice. It's a good looking animal. Some of the babies he produced are just ridiculous.
Yeah, you would think with those Cambro tubs being so clear and stuff and having a light on each shelf in that rack that plants would be all about it, but they just, I don't know. Do you think they do better when they're planted in soil as opposed to just water?
Good
Obviously there's more nutrients and stuff, but
yeah, with pothos, you see them growing up, brick walls in Florida. So yeah, I think giving them soil and obviously there's benefits to that. But once they're rooted, I think in water is fine. I remember my grandma had one that just sat on her windowsill in a vase of water that I don't know if she ever even changed the water. She just topped it off when it got low. But I think once you get them rooted, that's kind of the biggest challenge. Once a lot of plants want to put down roots before they'll put out vegetative growth. And so because the roots kind of, that's their source to nutrients and water. So It's probably more that yours are just slower and not that they're not doing well.
Yeah, dude, look at that. It's just climbing up the wall.
Yeah, it's what is that? Is it potted or is it in like a tank?
I'm
think
trying
it's
to
in a
remember. I think
tank.
it's in like, yeah, it's in some sort
It
of
says
just
heavily
basin.
planted aquarium.
Yeah,
Below with air stones, room circulating fan above. So I would assume it's a small,
like a fish tank or something.
yeah. It's just growing
just
up
wild.
and over it. It's awesome. Right.
Now, as far as buying plants from like Lowe's and stuff, I know a lot of people sort of do, what is it, like carbon bombs to get rid of any snails or anything like that. Have you done that at all? With
Yeah, some people will do, they'll seal them up and melt some dry ice around them and try to CO2 bomb them. Or I tend to just, from Lowe's or from a garden center, I guess I have the luxury of having a greenhouse, so I'll just buy it and put it in there for a month or so and let it grow out. And if I don't see any issues, I tend to not worry about it.
do you change out the soil or anything when you get it into?
Yeah, so much of those soils are peat based soils, and I don't like peat at all in my either plant substrates or animal substrates, because when peat gets dry, it's really hard to re-wet. So I'll just, the minute I get it, I take it out of the pot and put the jet set on a hose sprayer and blast all the soil off and put it either in, if it's destined for a tank, I'll probably just put it in sphagnum moss or something like that. Or if I'm going to grow it out in the greenhouse for a little while, I've got a few different kind of bark mixes that I mix up stuff. Sphagnum doesn't do well here over time outside because of the heat and humidity in the summer. It just turns it into kind of slimy goo.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm growing anything in sphagnum in the greenhouse, it has to basically be repotted every fall, just because every summer breaks it down. So I try to use the cocoa chunks like Repta Chip or something like that, and mixed in with regular mulch, hardwood mulch from the store, or orchid, what they call orchid bark and that kind of pumice.
Gotcha.
Very cool.
So, in keeping tree frogs and dart frogs, is there one in particular you enjoy more? And then, what are sort of the pros and cons of both? I kept a red-eyed tree frog when I was a kid. I put it in like a little 1 gallon aquarium with a heat lamp right on top of it, and absolutely fried it. Haven't kept tree frogs since.
I've always wanted to. I've always wanted to keep tree frogs because I absolutely love them, especially like gray tree frogs. I love gray tree frogs, but I've never done it. They scare me. Not actually, but like keeping them scares me.
The glass frogs are cool.
Yeah, the glass frogs are cool, and I'd almost classify glass frogs more like darts. Their care and their setups are, glass frogs from a husbandry standpoint are basically just nocturnal dart frogs. You'd set them up naturalistic with a substrate, just like you would darts. They'll eat. Most of the small glass frogs will take Heidi fruit flies as a staple. Some of the bigger ones like Albomaculata and Granulosa will want like pinhead, week and a half old crickets, or bean beetles. If you did bean beetles, that would work too. But yeah, and they'll breed like dart frogs. You can put them on a rain chamber. Some of the tougher species may need a rain chamber, but I've bred all of our Hyalina batrachium, valerioi, and Oreoguttatum, which are one of those is the Costa Rican species and the other's from Ecuador, in basically dart frog conditions, big leafy, philodendron, pothos type plants, typical terrestrial substrate, just mist on them at night. If you get a cold front come through and your females are gravid, you'll most likely get eggs. Same thing with Albomaculata. Albomaculata. I've gotten eggs from them the same way. I have a friend who keeps Granulosa, and he was only ever successful getting eggs in a rain chamber. So those may need to be cycled a little more. But yeah, glass frogs, people think they're sensitive and are tough to keep, but they're basically, like I said, nocturnal darts. As far as like true tree frogs, they're a lot more work than darts are because they're not as conducive to a naturalistic setup. I've kept of like true tree frogs, I've kept Agalicnus lemur, which is the lemur leaf frog, which that one's a little more. I've kept those naturalistic and bred those. They do need a rain chamber to breed. Some people, if you miss them heavily in a naturalistic setup, they'd probably lay eggs too. But then things like Crespidopus, those they're from high in the canopy. They'd almost probably prefer UV because they do sleep during the day on the tops of leaves. So they're probably getting some sun, and they need pretty clean conditions. So when I've kept those in the past, you almost keep them like a chondro or a emerald, puppy pad bottom that you keep kind of humid, nice big water dish, some leafy plants for them to sleep on. And you really keep them dry in the non-breeding season. You rarely mist. You just keep fresh water on them, and they'll go down in those water bowls and soak. But misting really stresses them out because it gets them in the breeding mode, and they really need seasonality to get them to the point where they build up their reserves in the dry season, and when they breed, they lay 20 eggs or so in a clutch, and then they're not going to lay another clutch until 6 months down the road. I have kept the other tree frog that I've got probably the most experience with, or Anatheca, or their Triprion now, Spinosa, the coronated tree frog. And those are tree hole nesters. So they lay their eggs in, like at the water line. In nature, they'll go into a tree hole and actually lay their eggs at the water line. In captivity, you can use like cork rounds or something, and they'll do the same thing. And then the tadpoles will eat the unfertilized eggs or the extra eggs that fall in, similar to like Ufaga or some of the Renitomea do. Those take to a naturalistic setup a little better than some of the true like leaf, the Agalicnus, red eyes, Crespidopus, Calcarifer, all kind of want that sterile high canopy conditions.
Oh, that's so cool. Little tadpoles moving around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the Oreogatatum. That's the Ecuadorian species.
Are they all that pale usually?
In that species, they generally are. Some of them have those yellow spots on the dorsal side, and some of them have bigger yellow spots, but that species is really clear. And then this is the Costa Rican. That's Valeroy.
Those are incredible, man.
Yeah, that's freaking cool. I don't know, man. I loved my darts. I miss my Ranitomea especially. I'm hoping eventually I'll get back into some, but I need more space to do that.
Yeah, they do eat up a good bit of space. I got started in darts. They'll always kind of be a first love, so I don't see myself ever getting completely rid of them. I'm down to, I only keep now Red Vicente, which is the one that you just had up.
Yep.
Redhead Histrionica, Bilsa sylvatica, and Golfito granulifera. So I keep all Ufaga now, and they're just easier. They raise their own tadpoles.
Mm-hmm.
You're only going to get 2 to 3 babies per clutch, and you might get, of the Vicente, I might get 10 offspring in a year from a pair. From the larger obligates, maybe 5 if you're lucky. So you're not overwhelmed with froglets. You're not overwhelmed with a bunch of babies to take care of. So they're just easier from that perspective. They're not, the froglets are a little more fragile than some of the easier Renitomea or Dendrobates, but they kind of take care of themselves as long as you take care of the adults.
Yeah, I tried the blue jeans, and they were imports, and it did not. That was the only Ufaga I kept. So
yeah, and those are those Nicaraguan blue jeans are real hit and miss. Their colors, I like their coloration better than the Costa Ricans, but I had some for a while and I never saw them. They're super shy, and a lot of them didn't make it.
Yeah, I wanted to sort of get into them more, but I don't know. I just ran into May. I liked so much because they didn't take up as much space as my the Vitatis and stuff I had, and Luke's and whatnot. So I loved the Vanzolini. I had some Imitator Veradero I liked a lot. I had why am I drawing a blank?
You had a lot of darts for a while there, man.
The Southern Variabilis. I had one.
Oh, yeah,
female. I
yeah, those
never,
are nice.
never got a male for her. I really wish I had, because those were just so freaking gorgeous, man. They're fun. I do miss them, and I miss like hearing the calls and stuff around the house when it's quiet.
That would have been my
Yeah.
favorite thing about him, is having the calls around, because that goes back. I grew up with a pond in my front yard, and whenever it rained, the toads would just flood the pond, and all night you would just hear them calling like crazy, and it was the best thing to fall asleep to.
What do you? I mean, do you have Histrionica now or no?
Yeah, I have the redheads. What you've got up here?
Yeah.
Oh, those are freaking insane,
Yeah,
man.
Yeah, that was my first what they call large obligate, and those always, the redheads kind of hold a special place for me. There's tons of cool ones available now, but I've always liked the redheads.
And how do those compare to the Vicente?
So Vicente are tiny. They have a call. If you've ever heard a Scudo Pamilio call, their call's a lot more high pitched and rapid. Both are probably equally as bold. I like the Vicente because they don't seem to be as aggressive as the other Ufaga. Generally you keep Pamilio or the large species in pairs. I've kind of accidentally ended up with a 2.2 in one of my enclosures, and both pairs are raising eggs, and the males call at each other and then go court females and then go back to calling at each other, but there's never any wrestling. Or I found that having the 4 in the enclosure together, they're a lot bolder than just the pair. So I like them from the aspect that they're small and that they do well in groups. And that was also kind of that species was kind of special to me, because that was another one that when we go over to Ian's house, he'd talk about climbing trees in Panama and knocking eyelash vipers out of the trees and stomping bromeliads as he climbs up to get to the top of the tree to tip it over to catch some Vicente that are in the top, the top bromeliad at the top of the tree. And I got a pair years ago, back when they were really rare, and was on the cusp of, I'd gotten into them with a friend. We'd gone in together. I had started getting eggs, but they were older and kind of got infertile eggs, and finally started getting tadpoles, but they weren't developing. And then he decided he wanted to get out of them. And so I didn't have the money to buy him completely out. So we decided to sell them. And then for 3 years, probably, you didn't see red Vicente. They were just extremely rare in the hobby. And then there was a Panama import of them probably in 2018 or so, one of the last full Panama shipments. And I was contacted by somebody asking if I wanted a pair. And I was like, absolutely. I'm going to figure these out and get them right this time. And so I started with a pair from that, and I still have that pair. I've set up a second trio, and then the original pair also has some others. Frog, that's the one that I said I ended up with the 2.2. So both tanks are breeding now. So I've got a pretty decent group of those now.
What the heck is that?
I've always loved just like with the Histrionica and the Sylvitica, they're just they just have a look to them that you don't see in any other.
That thing is menacing looking.
They just have that sort of blockiness to them.
That was amazing.
Yeah, and they can be. I've seen tanks where people, really large 3x3x3 enclosures where people were keeping Pamilio locale with an Aratus, and you would think, the Aratus are a good bit bigger, but the Pamilio will ride the Aratus around like, cowboy on a horse until the Aratus are just.
Way.
Oh yeah.
That's incredible. So do you keep any snakes in like planted aquarium or enclosures or anything like that?
Not planted like you would a dart frog. I mean, I'll put either some live potted plants in the arboreal. I keep the emeralds, and I've also got a pair of Corallus annulatus, the annulated tree boas. And so I'll put some, potted plants in there, but nothing as elaborate as like a dart frog enclosure.
Right. Yeah, I didn't know if you I just meant live plants in general, not so much like the darts.
Yeah, I'll do like a pot of philodendron or something.
Nice.
Do you, so between pothos and philodendron, do you find that one is easier to, like, does one take off faster than the other?
No, not generally. Well, probably. I don't use a whole lot of the green and yellow pothos. I don't love variegated plants, but it's just a look thing for me.
Mhm.
I'll go for they call it silver pothos, or it's a syndapsis, that if I'm putting it with an Asian species, I'll use that. Otherwise, I'll use the heartleaf philodendron for New World stuff. But that's just kind of one of my quirks. I like to keep the New World plants with New World animals and vice versa.
Oh, you had some Spengleri at some point too?
Yeah, I've got a pair. I've got an adult pair now.
Oh, that's cool.
The male is just getting to be breeding size, so maybe I'll get eggs this year.
I still need to get Pierre Leone's book.
Yeah, it's a good book, and it's cheap.
He said he'd send me an autographed copy. I just got to pay for it.
Yeah, it's worth I think I got it. It was only $15, $20 or so. It's packed with information.
And how do you have yours set up?
I forget, I think they're 30 wide, 20, 24 deep, 12 tall vision cages. And they're on just kind of a soil substrate topped with sphagnum. And then I've got a nice, plant saucer water dish, and kind of built them a little cave area out of cork bark for cover. And I've got one mister that goes off once or twice a day in there, and they're kept, kind of room temperature. I have LED lights for the plants, but I don't use UV or anything. They're almost like lizard turtles. They act more like a lizard than they do a turtle.
Yeah, I had no idea that they were as small as they are until we talked to Anthony about them, on here a couple of weeks ago.
They're tiny.
Because every picture you see, it's like super close up and stuff, and so you don't really get much of a context in terms of the actual size of them. But
right, yeah, my male is 3 inches probably.
That's crazy.
That's so wild, man.
Yeah,
it's so tiny.
So, what's your, of all the darts and stuff you've kept, what's like your bottom line, like, favorite, bar none, whether you still have them or you kept them in the past? What's the number one pick?
That's kind of hard. I would probably say either Vicente or Renitomea reticulata. And those are kind of still, I produced a couple of offspring when I had them, but I had 2 pairs at one time. And probably at any given time while I was breeding those, I had 30 tadpoles, and they would pop front legs and be, a froglet absorbing its tail, and they'd die. And then the same thing would happen, just boom, one after the other. I'd get them almost to development and they'd die. And I think what happened was my water quality, I wasn't using RO back then. I was just using faucet water, because when everybody says our water here is some of the highest quality in the country, and for humans to drink, that's right. But I've done ppm testing on it, and we're at like 150 parts per million, which is pretty high for compared to rainwater or something like that. And so I think I still had some dissolved solids in the water that by the time from water changes and topping off the water, in just the amount of time, they sat in those cups for 2 months, the water got stale. And by the end, the water quality was going bad, and that kind of did them in. I really think if I did them again and just kept the tads in RO, they'd probably do fine.
Mm-hmm.
But those are just cool. I mean, they're tiny. That's the smallest dart frog available in the hobby. But they're like tinks. I mean, they're like, a third of an inch long tinks. They're probably the most aggressive Renitomea. They're largely terrestrial. You can pretty much only keep them in pairs. I initially got 4 froglets and just were growing them up together, and woke up. They don't have the call like an imitator. They're in the Fantastica group, so they have that kind of buzz, Dendrobates like call, and they were calling so loud with that buzz call, which isn't very loud at all, but it was loud enough it woke me up one Saturday morning. And this was when I was in college and had them in my apartment. And one of the females was holding the other female down in the film canister of water, trying to drown it. So these are frogs that are this big. And so I popped her out. And then the next day, same thing, but with the males, popped one of the males out. Within a week, the pair that was still in the enclosure, I had eggs, set up the other one, and I started getting eggs from them too. But, you keep any, maybe in a big, 2-foot cube or something, you could keep a group, but in a standard size tank that's relatively, normal for the size of the frog, if you do more than a pair, you're only going to end up with a pair in the end. So just the kind of quirks with them, I think they're a challenge. They also have really nice colors. They're really bold for a tiny frog. And so those are, between them and the Vicente, those are easily my favorite.
Yeah, it never ceased to amaze me just how that something so small can be so complex behaviorally and socially. Like it's mind blowing, that they're so hardwired to do these, parental care and, killing potential, competition. You would just think something like that, it'd be like keeping roaches or something. Like there's nothing really like there's nothing you wouldn't expect complex behaviors from them.
Right.
So that was one thing that just always fascinated me, especially about Rana Tomei. It was just how big, their personalities would be for being so small, and then just how complex they are. Especially the Vanzolini, and watching them, do their thing, and watching Dad move tadpoles, and seeing it'd be like every time I came into my bedroom, which is where they were, they'd be around the canister, they'd be taking care of tadpoles, they'd be in the Bromeliad checking on stuff. Like they're just constantly like 24/7 checking things and taking care of things, and those were fun. I really enjoyed the Vanzolini a lot.
Yeah, and that's another thing that's cool that you get with darts, and you can get it with a lot of the species, is you can witness the full cycle of life in one enclosure, whether it's the Ranitomea or the Ophaga that are raising offspring. They court, they lay eggs, they transport, they raise, they morph, or things like Anthony I, where you can set up a pond in the corner, and Dad takes 30 tadpoles on his back and hauls them over to the pond, and they grow up in there, and then they'll live on fruit fly and detritus, and some number of them will morph, and you end up with you can see it that way too, where there's no parental care. So yeah, I've always thought that darts are one of a cool, from an educational standpoint, that seems like a cool classroom animal that the maintenance is relatively simple as long as you can be disciplined, and you can really learn a lot from one single enclosure.
Yeah. Did you ever keep any Phyllobates?
I've kept Vittatus. Friends have had Terribilis. I've always liked the kind of smaller stuff. I always wanted, there was a morph of Auritania, which is a Colombian species, that they called them wide-banded Auritania, and they were almost, they kind of looked like Vittatus coloration, but in a slightly bigger frog. They're small tink, big Aratus size. That was a real old line locale morph that it's probably dead in the hobby now. There's not a lot of people that keep that species.
I always wanted tinks, never kept any though.
Yeah, I've kept a few over the years, but I've never produced Dendrobates. I've kept Lukes and tinks and Aratus for some amount of time, but never. I've always been more interested in the smaller ones, or the seemingly more complex ones.
Yeah,
the tinks are the really big ones, right?
Yeah.
I've always, obviously, when it comes to dart frogs, those are the ones that I liked a lot. I like big. I don't know what it is, my fascination with big frogs. I really like big frogs. I don't know why. I think they're so cool. But when it comes to darts, I love the tinks, man. They're just huge.
Yeah, and those are good. I mean, they're super bold. So that's kind of your existential. Azurius is what you show it just about anybody in Azurius, and they'll be able to tell you it's a dart frog.
Right. Oh yeah, for sure.
That was one of the things I liked about tinks, was just there was so many different varieties of them. You know, there's like one that fits the bill for just about anybody. I always like Atlantis was always one of my favorites.
Yeah, I like that color
Outer
too.
blues, you know,
Yep.
just I like the Atlantis because it was mostly black. You know, like their eyes were black, the bodies were black. There was like faint yellow.
I don't know if I've seen
I'll have
that.
to show you, but
Yeah.
those were always. I never kept any of them, but that was always the one that caught my eye the most. There's just, and then the Tumamake are also ridiculous. Those
those are crazy. It's like you took 5 different frogs and shoved them together.
Yeah.
Jeez. Cool.
So as far as snakes, if you could only keep one species, what would it be?
Maybe annulatus.
Nice.
That annulated tree boa.
Yeah.
Everyone I've talked to that has those enjoys those as well.
Yeah, they've got kind of the attitude of a basin. You take them out, do whatever. I guess the only downside is that they don't come in the colors that Amazons do, but they also don't have the attitude that Amazons do. So that makes them pretty neat. They're not great display animals. They tend to kind of, sometimes they'll perch, sometimes they'll get under a piece of cork or something on the ground. But you know, you can get some really, really stunning orange phase animals, and even some of the brown ones. You know, you get some that kind of have that white speckling up into. Terry Burwell's got some that kind of have that freckling of white in them, and that's pretty neat.
Those are a little larger than Amazons, aren't they?
Yeah, I think they get 7-8 feet or so. I'm not familiar with how big Amazons get, but
I know they're thin-bodied animals, but I thought the annulateds were a little larger than the.
I think annulateds are a little chunkier, but not. I mean, when you're talking about chunky in the context of tree boas and stuff, that's not much. But I think the annulated seem to be a little more heavy bodied than compared to Amazons. But I could be completely wrong there. I've never kept them, but I've always wanted Rushis. That's always been
those are cool too.
People need to start producing them.
Yeah, and those are wild. There's just so many. You know, the mainland animals look totally different than those. Is it Trinidad? Is that
Trinidad?
Yeah.
I love the high black. I can't remember if that's the Venezuelans or the Costa Ricans, but there's some that just have a ton of black.
Right.
You know, but they fit right in with the Gonyosoma jansseni that I have too. There's just something about that fade. You know, I like that light to dark.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just really cool. Which
the jansseni are incredible.
Yeah, but I mean, like having those, I have a pothos that's gotten pretty big in that cage. You know, going back to that, and they haven't destroyed it.
Yeah.
Somehow, I'm actually kind of surprised. I mean, I don't see them much. If I'm in the room, they're not out, but I find like sheds and stuff all the time, so they're definitely doing their thing. But for a colubrid, they're surprisingly not destructive.
You should put a camera, like a night vision camera or something, to see how they do at night, like what they do, how active they are. So I'd be curious because I've never seen them out. Like whenever I'm in your room, I've never seen them out.
If I see them, they have a head, like their head is just sticking out. And I think because they have a UV bulb, I think it's kind of what we've talked about with some of the geckos and stuff, where they only put like a portion of their body out and get what they need instead of just hanging out full bore.
Right. But I'm curious how active they are. Like at night, do they go around and cruise the tank? And
I don't think so. I think they're pretty strictly diurnal. I've never noticed, like, because usually before I go to bed, I'll walk in real quick, double check everything, flip on the light, and I never really see them out. So I don't know. But like I said, somehow that pothos has managed to survive and do really well.
Yeah.
Not, you know, there was a point in time where I had a pothos in like one of the taller deli cups in like a hanger that screws into the side of the tub. And I had that in with one of the chondros, and I would find that plant ejected and like dirt everywhere.
I remember that. It was almost daily, dude. He destroyed that.
It finally got to the point where I just took it out. I was like, I'm not playing this game with you. I don't
I'm
know
not
what
playing
he's
this
doing.
game.
Like, it's a chondro. They're not supposed to do this kind of crap.
He kept on trying to perch on the cup holder, didn't he?
I just left the holder in there, and he just started perching on it. I was like, okay,
that's yours now.
If you like it, you like it. Have fun, buddy. What is your advice for people advice for success with a diverse collection? That's the way I worded the question.
I think to be successful, you one have to be disciplined. You have to, depending on what you're, if it's frozen rodents, that's one thing. You can kind of order more of those when you need it. But if you're breeding bugs or ordering crickets, make sure you get things weekly or in how much time that you're going to use them. If it's fruit fly cultures, you make them every week or every other week, whatever your routine is to make sure you maintain the amount that you need to feed, and pay attention to species that that have similar requirements. You can always find a middle and kind of go higher temperature or lower temperature in a microclimate maybe, but there's it's like you can't keep a desert species that needs it 110 degrees in with a montane high elevation Central American species. It's just not going to work. The difference in the temperature or the difference in the humidity is just not amenable to one room. I think that's the big thing. And maybe, like I keep most of my turtles and tortoises live outside most of the year. And the way I decide to work with a species that I'm going to keep outside is I check the latitude of where they come from. If you look at, most of the stuff I keep are from North Vietnam, South China, and that's almost on the same latitude as coastal Louisiana. So, that coastal climate, the temperatures are similar, the humidity similar, rainfall patterns are similar. And so I only bring those in when we're going below freezing. Otherwise they stay outside, and I just make sure their pens are mulched extra, and they're able to do fine. Species that I keep inside kind of have to deal with the dart frog kind of baseline, room temperature. I keep Phelsuma in there, but those, I give them a concentrated warm spot that allows them to heat up warmer than the room, but it's able to be controlled. Same thing with, snakes. You can kind of deal with it. You have them in different racks or different enclosures and heat panels and that kind of stuff. But, you really want to, in some way or another, you have to focus your collection. And here I am talking about all the species that I keep and saying you have to focus, but the culture requirements and what you have to do to keep most of what I keep can translate to the other species that I keep. So
there's a common denominator.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So you got any plans for the rest of the year? You got any projects you want to get into that you haven't yet? Sort of what's
I am working so I have a group of Hyoscines spinosa, which they call them cogwheel turtles. They're from kind of all of Indonesia, and it's the ones that as babies, they kind of look like ninja stars. The back scoots are serrated, and then as they age, that kind of wears down and becomes smoother. I have 2.2. They're all in kind of cooperation with TSA, Turtle Survival Alliance. But I have a 2.2 that came from them, that came from a specific confiscation that they ended up with. And I forget, they have locales attached to them. And then I also have 5.8 from a different group that they got. And so I'm kind of keep managing those groups separate, but I'm hoping to get, or at least start getting, viable offspring from them this year. I had one egg that was fertile last year. It went to term and the baby died in the egg. But that's a species that not a lot of people are having any kind of real continual success. People pop out a baby every once in a while, but there's probably only one or two people that are continually producing them year in, year out here. And that's one that I'd like to really focus on this year. I'm redoing some pins in the yard and trying to figure out which males are compatible with females to try to get the best fertility. And so that's kind of a focus. I'd like to hopefully get spengler eye eggs. Like I said, I've got some bloods that'll hopefully go. And then I'm pretty continually producing the Clemmer eye, the Williams eye, and I've produced Ornata starting last year. So hopefully, those kind of projects continue on doing well.
Awesome.
Very cool, man. Well, where can people find you?
I have a personal page on Facebook, Zachary Goodnow. My business hobby page is also on Facebook, Equatorial Ecosystems. I'm on Instagram, Equatorial_ecosystems, and I do have a website, www.equatorial-ecosystems.com. And if you go to my Instagram, there's a link that can take you to all of those things. So
Awesome.
Very cool, man.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you coming on, man.
yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, this was a great episode. A lot of good information here. I think a lot of people will enjoy it.
We'll have to do a Dart Frog specific show at some point.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
I got now that I don't have them, I gotta live vicariously through others. So
You got to get your fix somehow.
that's right. And I could always just piss off the wife and get into them again and put another tank on our dresser and drive her crazy. So.
Yeah.
What's one more?
Yeah, exactly. She gets a little agitated when I have things outside of the four walls of my room. Like when things start migrating out, that's when I start to hear about it. So unless it's in quarantine, and then I tell her and it's just in our closet or our bedroom. I'm like, these aren't going to be here forever. Before she starts asking questions.
It's fine. Just relax. It's okay.
Before you start getting on my case. It's temporary. But yeah, I'm sure everyone fights that battle. But,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right,
thanks,
man. Well, we appreciate it, and have a good night.
Yep. Thank y'all. Same here.
All right, man.
Later. All right. So real quick, 4 years THP, man.
Oh yeah, Monday marked the big 4. That's
4.
It's wild, man.
4 years of putting up with me.
Yeah. It's about as long as I've known you now too, because we only knew each other a few months before that. So
yeah. So it's been awesome. Just wanted to do a quick sort of shout out to everybody.
Thank you all for the continuous support over the years. There's a few people still listening that caught us right from the get-go and have been listening ever since, which I always love to hear that. I think it's really cool when we get somebody like that.
Yeah, so the network is over 200 episodes. I want to say it's over 250 episodes now with everything. Over 300,000 plays.
Wow.
On all the platforms minus Spotify, which is another like 30-ish thousand, I think. So it's just been insane. Like looking at the analytics and stuff, man, we've been like doubling in growth every year. So it's been awesome. I feel like we say all the time sort of what we've already said. It's just awesome what's become of all of it, and we appreciate every bit of support, whether it's just listenership, whether it's Patreon stuff, whether it's saying hi to us at Daytona or hanging out with us at Daytona,
or if this is the only podcast you listen to from us, we appreciate it all, man. It's great. It's been an awesome run, and just amazing how far we've come. People that we consider very, very close friends came from basically starting THP 4 years ago, and it's crazy. I have better friends from making this podcast than I do that people I've known forever. Like it's crazy, but it's also fantastic, and I wouldn't change it for the world. So very thankful for this show, this community. Very thankful for you, buddy, and all that gushy.
Yeah, I think
stuff.
I think a lot of it is us sort of just going into it with no real plan or idea of what we wanted it to be. Just kind of ride the wave, and
we didn't go into it thinking we'd be successful.
Or how, or even how long it would last.
It's
just one of those things where it's like, we're going to see what happens. And, here we are. So I think whatever we're doing is working, and we'll keep recording if y'all will keep listening.
Yeah.
So
that's about all it comes down to.
This was episode 154 of the Herpeticulture Podcast, brought to you by BlackBoxCages.com. Check them out. Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. And Steve Snake's wearing his Venom hot sauce. Grab you some if you like it hot.
You like it, Steve?
He's the man to talk to. You can
Man.
order some at, I believe it's stevesnakesweary.com.
Mm-hmm.
You can
get
order the
some.
whole set.
Get the whole set and get yourself a BlackBox rack and
put your
so,
rack together. Eat some wings.
It's so good you could
Get your rack covered in hot sauce.
Then you just wipe it off with your chicken nugget and still good because that BlackBox rack is clean, boy. Ooh, son.
It cleans itself. It's so clean. You good?
No, I'm just dying a little bit, dude.
Okay.
This weather's got me. My allergies.
Dude,
are
everyone's got sinus infections.
rocking my world, man. I'm dying. I've been in like a fog at work, and I don't know if it's allergies mixed with kidney stones and
everyone's
anything else that's
struggling.
Yeah. But
all right, we'll be back for Snakes and Stogies 112 on Monday, 9 p.m. EST. We'll see you there. We'll be back next week, as far as I know, unless something happens, because I feel like I announce episodes and then something comes up and we're like, never mind.
That hasn't happened that
Psych.
often. Normally, we're pretty good about knowing we're gonna skip in advance. But anyways,
thank you.
Thanks for listening. Y'all have a good weekend.